Hari. Right here. Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamanatiravana Chadi Jamanatiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamanatiravana Chadi Jamanatiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jayo Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. Instruction. Okay. What? It's okay. Okay. In yesterday evening class, there was reading from the Bhagavatam where Vritrasura was speaking to Indra. Standing before Vritrasura, Indra was there, and Vritrasura said, "Fantastic. You, evil, killer of a Brahmana, killer of my brother, killer of your spiritual master, now I have an opportunity to finish you. Thank you very much for coming before me. You're as good as dead. See my trident. You're finished." And then he starts to speak about, but on the other hand, if you use this thunderbolt weapon that has the power of Vishnu invested in it, you can kill me. And if you kill me, then I'll be freed from this curse that I received from Parvati in my previous life. And I'll go back to Godhead and you'll get your kingdom back. So what are you waiting for? Kill me. Use your thunderbolt weapon. Don't hesitate. And then there's more coming. We'll go into the more this evening. Then the natural question that comes at the end of the whole Vritrasura story is, how did he, because it was an Uttama Bhagavat personality. So that's pretty unusual that someone that's in the body of a demon is an Uttama Bhagavat. So how did this happen? And the answer is, in his previous life, he was Chitraketu. And he had the association of Angira and Narada. And so there's a series of events that I'll just quickly summarize and then read from Narada speaking about devotional service. So Angira was a great personality, with one major exception. He was really attached to the idea of having a son. Angira visited his kingdom. Angira Muni visited his kingdom and saw, he doesn't look so good. What's wrong? Oh, I want a son, I want a son. So he could see that the king isn't ready to receive transcendental knowledge. So he prepared him to receive transcendental knowledge. And the preparation was he would have a son who would quickly die after he was born. And the circumstance was he was poisoned by the co-wives or queens. And so he's in this terribly distressed situation because his son just died, who he was really attached to having a son. And voila, Narada and Angira show up. And they then, because he was in this upside down condition emotionally, he was ready to receive transcendental knowledge. They imparted transcendental knowledge. And he was so disturbed or deranged in his mind that he didn't even recognize Angira. Who are you two? You came at the right time and said all the right things. Who are you anyway? And Angira said, you forgot. I'm the one who came and made this arrangement so you could hear transcendental knowledge. And it wasn't until he was ready, after hearing transcendental knowledge, that Narada begins to speak bhakti. Because up to this point, it's just knowledge and detachment. Detachment from the temporary, attachment to the eternal. So the king Chitraketu says, because you are great personalities, you can give me real knowledge. I am as foolish as a village animal, like a pig or a dog, because I am merged in the darkness of ignorance. Therefore, please ignite the torch of knowledge to save me. So they've already given knowledge, Brahma Gyan, and now comes Bhakti. Angira said, "My dear king, when you desired to have a son, I approached you. Indeed, I'm the same Angira Rishi who gave you this son. As for this Rishi, he's the great sage Narada, the direct son of Lord Brahma. My dear king, you are an advanced devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To be absorbed in lamentation for the loss of something material is unsuitable for a person like you. Therefore, we have both come to relieve you from this false lamentation, which is due to your being merged in the darkness of ignorance. For those who are advanced in spiritual knowledge, to be affected by material loss and gain is not at all desirable. When I first came to your home, I could have given you the supreme transcendental knowledge, but when I saw that your mind was absorbed in material things, I gave you only a son who caused you jubilation and lamentation. My dear king, now you're actually experiencing the misery of a person who has sons and daughters. Oh, king, owner of the state of Shurasena, one's wife, his house, the opulence of his kingdom, and his various other opulences and objects of sense perception are all the same in that they are all temporary. One's kingdom, military power, treasury, servants, ministers, friends, and relatives are all causes of fear, illusion, lamentation, and distress. They are like a Gandharva Nagara, a non-existent palace that one imagines to exist in the forest. Because they are impermanent, they are no better than illusions, dreams, and mental concoctions. This is still knowledge and detachment. These visible objects, like wife, children, and property, are like dreams and mental concoctions. Actually, what we see has no permanent existence. It is sometimes seen and sometimes not. Only because of our past actions do we create such mental concoctions, and because of these concoctions, we perform further activities. The living entity in the bodily conception of life is absorbed in the body, which is a combination of the physical elements, the five senses for gathering knowledge, and the five senses for action along with the mind. Through the mind, the living entity suffers three kinds of tribulations: adibhautika, adidaivaka, and adhyatmaka. Therefore, this body is a source of all miseries. Therefore, O King Chitraketu, carefully consider the position of the Atma. In other words, try to understand who you are, whether body, mind, or soul. Consider where you have come from, where you are going after giving up this body, and why you are under the control of material lamentation. Try to understand your real position in this way, and then you'll be able to give up your unnecessary attachment. You will also be able to give up the belief that this material world or anything not directly in touch with service to Krishna is eternal. Then you will obtain peace. Okay, here we go. The great Narada continued. My dear king, attentively receive from me a mantra, which is most auspicious. After accepting it from me, in 7 nights, you will be able to see the Lord face to face. My dear king, in former days, Lord Shiva and the other demigods took shelter of the lotus feet of Sankarsana. Thus, they immediately got free from the illusion of duality and achieved unequaled and unsurpassed glories in spiritual life. You will very soon attain that same position. That's pretty quick. That's even faster than Dhruva. The very next event is Narada decides by his mystic power to bring the small child, son of the king, back to life. And he speaks some words and invites him back. Oh, young boy, please see your father is in big distress and please relieve him from his distress. And then the boy speaks transcendental knowledge. When the conditioned soul, in the form of Maharaj Chitraketu's son, had spoken in this way and then left, Chitraketu and the other relatives of the dead son were all astonished. Thus, they cut off the shackles of their affection, which was due to their relationship with him, and gave up their lamentation. After the relatives had discharged their duties by performing the proper funeral ceremonies and burning the dead child's body, they gave up the affection that leads to illusion, lamentation, fear, and pain. Such affection is undoubtedly difficult to give up, but they gave it up very easily. And then the co-wives, the one who had poisoned the child, they kind of felt bad. They lost all their bodily luster. While lamenting, they remembered the instructions of Angira and gave up their ambition to bear children. Following the directions of the Brahmanas, they went to the bank of the Yamuna, where they bathed and atoned for their sinful activities. Thus, enlightened by instructions of the Brahmanas, Angira and Narada, King Chitraketu became fully aware of spiritual knowledge. As an elephant becomes free from the muddy reservoir of water, King Chitraketu came out of the dark well of family life. The king bathed in the water of the Yamuna, and according to prescribed duties, he offered oblations of water to the forefathers and demigods. Very gravely controlling his senses and mind, he then offered his respects and obeisances to the sons of Lord Brahma, namely Angira and Narada. Thereafter, being very much pleased with Chitraketu, who was a self-controlled devotee and a surrendered soul, Narada, the most powerful sage, spoke to him the following transcendental instructions. So here's the mantra is given. Starts Om Namastubhyam Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhimahi. There's the Dhimahi word. O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, who are addressed by the Omkar, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Lord Vasudeva, I meditate upon you. O Lord Pradyumna, Lord Aniruddha, and Lord Sankarshan, I offer you my respectful obeisances. O reservoir of spiritual potency, O spiritual bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are self-sufficient and most peaceful. O ultimate truth, one without a second, you are realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and are therefore the reservoir of all knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Long purport. Perceiving your personal bliss, you are always transcendental to the waves of material nature. Therefore, my Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. You are the supreme controller of the senses, and your expansions of form are unlimited. You are the greatest, and therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. The words and mind of the conditioned soul cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for material names and forms are not applicable to the Lord, who is entirely spiritual, beyond the conception of gross and subtle forms. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he, by his pleasure, protect us. Now he's not given detailed instructions like he did to Dhruva on the bhakti process. We can assume, although it's not stated here, this is Narada's business. He gives bhakti not just by giving mantra, but by giving instructions. So that there are no instructions in his the bhakti process other than mantra chanting, not a problem. Because he not only chanted his mantra, but it's not just, as we know, it's not just chanting of a sacred mantra. It's the concentration, and concentration is necessary, or is made possible by detachment, or say it conversely, where there's attachment, just put it here, where there's attachment, you can't be concentrated. And we all have experience of mantra chanting where we're not concentrated because there's other things that our mind goes to. So he got a lot of very powerful lessons from the subjective experience and as well as direct instructions. Now, there's no difference between the direct instruction that Chitraketu is getting compared to what we get when we read the Bhagavatam. But, of course, he was particularly attentive due to the circumstance and due to the fact that they were personally present. Hearing of the Bhagavatam, as well as hearing of mantra, is made possible or enhanced by recognizing the bhakti process, mantra chanting, and any of the other forms of bhakti bring us in direct contact with the personality of Godhead. The mantra is the Lord. The Bhagavatam is the Lord. These personalities that are reciting it, we're getting their association through sound vibration. And part of the difficulty is we're very covered, and in that covered condition, we're quite distracted, and we're all very familiar with the distracted territory. So we strive for practice becoming attentive. When any of the bhakti activities are being done, the activity itself is powerful, but the fullness of benefit of the activity is our being present in a devotional mood with the object of devotion, Krishna, and that which is in relation to Krishna, the Bhagavan and the Bhagavata, the person and the book. So Narada is speaking, and we're getting the benefit of Narada speaking. It's helping to make us eligible or qualified to have direct experience. If one has faith and takes up the bhakti process, something happens. But we also have experience that that's something that happens over a period of time. The experience may not be so prominent, and therefore we start to feel like there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with the process, or we start, attention goes elsewhere. And then we're feeling, I'm not getting the experience. In Brihat Bhagavatamrita, there's a nice section where Gopakumar, he's narrating his life story to a Brahmana, Mathura Brahmana. And in narrating this life story, he describes how it happened that he received his Gopal mantra. And after receiving the Gopal mantra, he received scant instructions, but he was told explicitly that this mantra will bestow upon you all desirable things. Now, living entities that are not purified have all kinds of desires. And so he went through all kinds of experiences. The center of the target was his wanting to experience the personality of Godhead. So several things happened. He ends up in Jagannath Puri. While he's in Jagannath Puri, the king who has no son develops affection for Gopakumar, and when the king departs the world, he turns the kingdom over to Gopakumar. So he's the king for a year. The king of Puri. And his access to Lord Jagannath becomes amplified or increased. And then lo and behold, he finds his spiritual master again, because his spiritual master just kind of disappeared. He finds him on the bank or by the ocean shore, and he's in an ecstatic state, etc., etc. Gopakumar comes forward, and his spiritual master says, "I see that your attention is drifting from the mantra, and so I've come. And I want to remind you of the value of the mantra and its purpose. Not only it can bestow upon you all desirable things, but he says some other things. But he's directly reviving Gopakumar's focus on his mantra. It works. It works in the same. Gopakumar didn't stop his chanting. He was just became a little distracted from his chanting. And the purpose. It says to fulfill all desire, but the desire he becomes more clear as time passes to see and be with Madan Gopal, the Lord of his mantra. He wants to see and be with Madan Gopal. It's a Krishna in a particular form. So here Narada is giving a mantra to King Chitraketu, and it's not Madan Gopal, it's another mantra. But and he does very quickly see Lord Sankarshan face to face. We'll continue reading some more tomorrow. But Chitraketu was, of course, our journey, each one of us, is different. And Gopakumar's is different from King Chitraketu's, for sure. But each one of us needs to be refocused on the goal, because there's the sambandha, and that's this initial teaching, and through sambandha again, detachment from the temporary. It doesn't mean trash it, just means not have that as your objective of life. Material accumulation, but spiritual identity, and spiritual identity connected with the Supreme. So then the abhideya, the process. But when engaging in the process, we should be mindful of what the goal is. And not just when mantra chanting, all the things that we do, but it starts with mantra chanting. And we can anticipate, the reciprocation with the Lord of the mantra, because the mantra is propitiating the Lord through his name, and the name is not different than the person. So, in short, the process of bhakti, which we're engaged in, is a process. It's meant to, and it effectively does. It brings us into direct contact with the personality of Godhead. The mantra in our Gayatri mantras, specifically in this Madan Gopal mantra, which we also receive specifically, it's described that it awakens attraction for the Lord of the mantra. We'll just say Madan Gopal, or Krishna in that form in his pastimes in Vrindavan, which isn't the same mantra that King Chitraketu received, but it has the same effect. He was focused on Lord Sankarshan, as Lord Shiva was the worshipper of Lord Sankarshan. And he became focused and fulfilled. And it cemented or secured his detachment, because detachment from knowledge is insufficient. It's realization can come, and experience can come from, and happiness can come. But without shelter that comes from the bhakti process, it's the process of taking shelter, then it's insufficient. And that means one will be again drawn into worldly distractions. It happens. We get involved with the temporary, we forget. And even when doing the primary activities of bhakti, that forgetfulness has us covered. So the Bhagavatam, the whole process of bhakti, the Bhagavatam, because this is our important means of deliverance, it's meant to remind us again and again in different ways what the heart of bhakti is, what the essence of spiritual life, devotional life, to achieve the goal is. And once he achieves that goal, he doesn't lose it. Even in his next life, he becomes Vitrasura. He doesn't lose it. And we'll hear some more about that in the evening class. So let's see if there's some discussion. You're taking lots of notes there, yes? Your thumbs are really active. Huh? Okay. How long did it take you to learn how to use your thumbs to write on your phone? I see people do it and I can't do it. I have to do this. Practice? It came natural.
Now it became natural.
Okay. I see kids do it all the time, but anyway. Yes.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Yes, working?
Yes, it's working.
Thank you. So, couple of questions. Why did Narada Muni and Angira Muni choose an Chitraketu king to deliver that knowledge?
Why not?
What are the qualities or his pious deeds?
Oh, what's the qualities in Angira? Well, we heard that this is what it says. Two of them said, and not exactly what that means. It's not selecting Angira said or Narada said. Both of them said, you're an elevated person. You're an elevated Vaishnava, devotee of the Lord. But his devotion to the Lord had been covered by that, excessive attachment. So that because he was a devotee of the Lord, and capable of moving from a stuck position to an unstuck position. They saw that. Now, what radar facility they have to see that when it's not manifesting itself, that's what, elevated devotees have the capacity to do. But, it doesn't even need, just like Narada visiting Daksha. Daksha was stuck and didn't get unstuck. Daksha insulted him. Badly. Cursed him. In addition to insulting. He said bad things and then he cursed him. But because he wants to deliver people. No. Daksha was a very powerful person. Very elevated in many, many ways. Anyway, without going into it. It's just their nature is to deliver, and here's an opportunity, let's go. It's like going on Sankirtan. What impels people to approach such a certain person is they're there. So they approach that person.
The other one is, So, how one should go about imparting this knowledge to one who is lamenting for one's loss or anything else?
There's a whole range of things, because like, it depends, answer. There's a whole range of things that one can do. And something that I learned from Shamasundar in Houston, and in another experience we had in New York, is don't try to give teachings initially. Just be there for the person. Be there for the person can mean all kinds of things. A similar thing happened to Detroit. So just take care of the person's material stuff for them. Their cooking and their cleaning and the washing pots and the laundry and shopping, and just be there so their mind doesn't have to be immersed in necessities, and then they have some space because they feel that there's a safe space for them to deal with the loss. What's the word? Mourning. Yeah, thank you. And then, you can provide some resource to that person from somebody that's like really skilled at helping people in that stage of mourning, or to be in contact with someone else that has been through the same thing. Don't pile up, transcendental knowledge, because that's very insensitive. It depends on the person, of course, but give them time and give them space. And when the time is right and the relationship is right, then, some transcendental knowledge, according to what you understand about the person and what's going to be helpful for them. Reading together passages from the Bhagavatam on topics like this, for example, at a certain stage, not immediately. And, again, it depends. Depends on how intense their sense of loss is. I've heard from people who have received that kind of care that they said, I really felt support. The devotees weren't trying to prop them up, just to be there and take care of everything and just be there. Have kirtan, of course, but without having to teach something. In New York, when 9/11 happened, I wasn't there. I was in Chicago. Chandrasekhar Swami, with whom I closely associate, was there. So what he decided to do was very wise. He went to a place in New York City where it kind of became a spiritual place. Union Square, which is just above, where the thing happened. And so different religious groups of all kinds of backgrounds went there and did their, thing very peacefully together. So what he did was, three things. He didn't try to say anything to anybody. Second is he was just sat with harmonium and chanted. And then a sign, the third thing was a sign that said something, something, something. And for those who wish for some personal counseling to deal with grief, come to 26 Second Avenue in the evening hours between this time that time. But he didn't try to engage in conversation with anybody, and people were in a heavy mood. And they did that for a month. And then at the end of that month, there was a whole group of us, like 20 of us. We sat down didn't stand, just sat on cushions and chanted Hare Krishna for 2 hours. Crowd of people crying, still a month later, because it takes a while. And we didn't try to say anything, just so. Next, you have another question?
It's from yesterday's evening. How does Rudrasura know that he was a king Chitraketu in his previous life?
Super Soul gave him that remembrance. How did Jud Bharat remember who he was in his previous life? Some people, when Super Soul gives remembrance, you've got it. Super Soul doesn't give it, you don't get it. Okay. You, note taker, you have one question. Here's the microphone. Yes, okay, good. Fantastic.
So, Maharaj, the question is, so Dhruv Maharaj was in a different situation when he met Narad Muni.
Right.
And Chitraketu Maharaj was in a different situation. And the advice or guidance that Narad Muni gave to both of them, that was also very different with
Yes.
different. So essentially he evaluated their positions and
Yes.
then offered.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's bearing the Lord's Bhakti Shakti in fullness. And he's very creative. Now think about it, not just those two. What did he say with King Prachiti Bari? What did he do with Magari the hunter? And you just keep going and on and on. He's very creative. He knows what to say, to whom, at what time. He knows when to show up, what not to say, what to say. He's a Bhakti Shakti Prabhu, the master.
So if he wanted, he could have given them different kind of advices too, because he is so empowered and powerful. But he did not try.
Yes, when there's diversity, it doesn't mean you select something and the other things are zeros. I'm just reading, just yesterday evening, reading the story of Usha and Aniruddha. And Chitralekha, she was a mystic. And it's described in some of the commentary that when she went to Dwarka after making these paintings, knowing exactly who these people were, and when the person was identified, she knew who it was, she knew where to go to get him, she could just zoom off she goes by mystic power. But the commentary says she couldn't enter Dwarka. So Narada Muni gave her instructions how to do it. He gave her the mystic, whatever it is, method to enter, and then she carried. So, Narada Muni does lots of things because, for the pleasure of Krishna. He didn't exactly instruct her. He gave her, at least according to this commentary, the mystic power so she could get Aniruddha and take Aniruddha, to where Usha was. So Narada is very clever. Valmiki, very different. Okay. Something further? You good? Okay. Anything else? There's something online?
This is from Govinda Mohini Mataji. As we practice the process of bhakti, how to make sure that we are not fanatical? Or how do we know if we are being fanatical?
Govinda Mohini, I don't think you need to worry about being fanatical. But since you're asking the question, maybe you know somebody that is. A few things come to mind. One is, the purpose of pleasing Krishna is obscured. And one becomes more kind of obsessive about doing something in a certain way. And that's fanatical, without reference to scripture. I know some people that are fanatical. Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this in terms of having a prejudice that, for some time, we or a group of people or of some generations, whatever, are accustomed to doing something in a certain way, and if people don't do things that way, then they're, judged. You're wrong. You're not doing this right, without acknowledging that there may be multiple ways to perform some activity, provided it's within the boundaries of Scripture. Pride is another consequence. Frustration is another consequence of being fanatical. Being disrespectful to others it's similar, but being disrespectful to others that have views that differ from your views. Or your group of persons' views. And that a subset of that is not having a proper understanding, not accepting that there's different understandings of Scripture and applications of those understandings of Scripture. They may differ within certain boundaries, of course. Next.
Uttama Bhakta Prabhu has a question. What is the best way to process the 10 million wives?
What's the best way to process
10 million wives?
10 million wives.
There's more explanation.
Yeah. How to process that?
Is it long age, etc., or something else? According to my calculation, marrying every day will take something like 27,500 years. I'd like to know your thoughts and message.
There could be multiple marriages at one time. That happened. Vasudeva married multiple wives, and it wasn't at different days. So don't pull out your yardsticks and start doing that. We find within the Vedic texts, we find people that have mystic powers or abilities. Again, because I was just reading this Usha and Aniruddha section, Banasura captured Aniruddha, who is an incarnation of the Lord, by using a Naga Pashu weapon. Now, who even knows what a Naga Pashu weapon is? And you can just say, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. Or, he had 10,000 arms. That's ridiculous. They can just dismiss the whole thing as ridiculous. But there are persons that have capacities. As time passes, as the yugas pass into it, things become more constricted, more constricted, more constricted. So I would imagine for each age, hearing what the previous age did seemed like, imaginary or fantastic beyond belief or something. So, how you can understand something like that is they had a capacity that's not an ordinary person's capacity. However, whatever the time arrangement was, and how did it happen? Arrangement. That we take it that it happened, not just saying that he's doubting that it happened, but it just doesn't fit within our mind because it's a capacity that's beyond our mind. To have so many arms or so many heads or whatever it is. We don't experience people that have so many arms and so many heads. Just from the section yesterday evening, Vishrup had 3 heads. We don't see people with 3 heads. It wasn't Lord Brahma, it was a Brahmin with 3 heads. Come on. So they have powers that we don't have. That's how it happened.
Uttama Bhakta Prabhu's next question. My understanding is that the king is playing a role like one of us, although actually an elevated soul. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, correct. But he's not like an actor on a stage where he's just pretending to be. He's a great soul that's being moved by illusion in a certain way. Next.
From Radha Vallabha Prabhu. Narada Muni's representatives and our current leaders are equally empowered, and it is just the receiver of instructions should be sincere. Is that correct understanding?
Is he asking the current leaders of today and the leaders within the Bhagavatam, they're equally empowered?
That is the premise. So they're equally empowered. So the receiver of the instructions should be sincere to be able to receive and practice.
Well, I would say no, that's not correct. It's just like, looking at the light fixture above your dining room table. There's 5 places for light bulbs, and there's if you want to say the electricity coming through the light fixture is the same, and you can put a 20-watt bulb or a 40-watt bulb or a 100-watt bulb or a 150-watt bulb, and it's going to manifest more light. If that's what you mean, the answer is yes. But we're not equally empowered because our capacity is less. We're Kali Yuga victims. We don't have the same capacity. We're not receiving, 250 watts. Although the potential is there. If the potential is then yes, but not in the practical. Prabhupada was empowered beyond all the rest of us.
This next question is from Radha. Yesterday you mentioned about some Christians having pride in the heart to not see the connection between having a pet and eating meat.
Yeah, we have this discussion with Radha many times.
What kind of pride do they have, or what are they proud of?
What kind of pride or what are they proud of? Well, it's the bodily conception And the pride is, I have rights. Because, fill in the blank. Because in this human form of life, I have the right. And they don't think about it because they have the right. And they think they have the right because, however, they have some rationale that says, whatever it says, animals have no soul, or God gave dominion over animals to man, or whatever it is that, they say gives them that right. But the root of it is the bodily conception that blocks higher consciousness. And the higher consciousness person is very sensitive to respecting life. And Radha, I was thinking about this. Ask them that next time you have a discussion with somebody on this topic, ask them what do they think of St. Francis of Assisi's teachings? Just an open-ended question. And then you can find out a little bit about how he respected not just animals, but all forms of life. But it was a big part of a platform of his teaching. See what they say. What do you think about St. Francis's teachings? Go ahead.
This question is from Shubhra Mataji. What is the antidote for being fanatical?
Krishna consciousness. And to get Krishna consciousness, to get the antidote, then there's a process. Following the process and being guided in the proper application of the process, but then, the awakening of our Krishna consciousness. You go back to the discussion about what does fanatical look like. And there's blocks to Scripture, what the real meaning of Scripture is. So then that requires humility and requires proper guidance to know what the Scripture actually says and to be able to be ready to live by it. Next. Okay, anything else in the room? Over here.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Just want to know what is the role and importance of the deity worship, especially for congregation members, in improving our chanting quality.
Can you help me understand the connection between your question and the topic that we discussed in the morning class?
Oh, this is out of the topic.
It's off topic.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, a standard instruction that Prabhupada gave for householders started with, when he was present, it started with pictures, in a place in one's home that's a sacred space, sacred place, that one does XYZ things. First thing in the morning, etc., etc., etc. A place where one offers prayers, makes clean, makes offerings of the Bhoga to the Supreme Lord through the medium of the pictures, and that's sufficient. He emphasized when there were temples, because in many cases, early beginning, there weren't temples, or temples didn't have deities than worship of the deity in the temple. I remember specifically, for example, it was a problem in Los Angeles because there were many householders and they were busy with their deity worship in their home enough so that they didn't attend the program or didn't do deity worship in the temple. And he spoke, apparently it was an issue, a controversy, one of those things. And Prabhupada spoke strongly about worshiping the deity in the temple. Now, they're right in the community, but having at the center of their life is a deity at the temple. Now, that doesn't mean all householders have to have no deities and only pictures. But I know some families, they do the standard of worship in their home is identical with the standard of worship in temples. And so it then from that starting point, it starts to diversify. So there's a minimum, and then it can start to diversify according to the propensities of a particular household couple towards deity worship. It may be something very simple. It may be something elaborate. It may be something they just stay even with pictures. So there's a range of diversity. It's important that there is such a place, an altar, but the altar can be very, very simple or can be more elaborate. There's a place for it. Online. This will be our last, and then we're going to end.
This is Radha Vallabha Prabhu's question. Mantra chanting is very effective in a retreat environment and even at our home with association of instructions during holidays and vacation. So when we are back to work after vacation, the quality or attention is limited. So how can we chant consistently in connected, attentive manner regardless of our external situations?
Take sannyas. Practice. And, right there in Houston, you have someone that is inspiring and guiding members like yourselves and your family and, the community, etc., Shyam Sundar, in absorption. And, Radha Krishna is always there, and Guru Bhakti is always there, and just reach out to them and connect with them. So I'm giving examples of through sadhu sangha, you can uphold your standards and your, because we have a tendency to become distracted by worldly stuff, which is the essence of your question. So stay in communication, stay in the association of those that somehow become very focused. And that'll help you stay focused. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.